My goodness, words cannot express how grateful I am for all your overwhelming support. To all my new subscribers, welcome. This is SEETA Kibira Tales, where I tell real life stories, stories of things that mostly happen to me, and also stories my friends have allowed me to tell on their behalf. Without you guys, I couldn't do this. Once again, thank you. If you missed last week's episode, please go back and watch it. I'll leave a link below. Just to recap from last week's episode, my father wasn't happy about my birth, so he denied me paternity, and as a result, I had no name for the first 6 months of my life. We were out of touch with my father for 9 years. Mom took me over for a holiday in December, and after the holidays, I insisted on staying to take care of my baby sister. My mother used it as an opportunity for me to bond with my father, but it was not all roses. My mother left me to stay at my father's because she thought it would be an opportunity for us to bond. But I would be lying if I told you that I remember my father spending even 5 minutes with me. That, however, didn't bother me. All that mattered to me was the fact that I was living under the same roof with my father, and I had baby siblings, and above all, a baby human to take care of. I was literally living my fantasy, having a father under the same roof, being a big sister, and having a baby human instead of my stuffed animals to play with. When my mother left me at my dad's, she thought he would enroll me into school. But that didn't happen. I instead became a maid in my own father's house. The moment the holidays were over and everyone left to school, my life changed too, but not for the good. I was supposed to start school with my siblings, but my dad refused to pay my school fees because he didn't want to waste money on me, literally in his words. At his command, I had to stay home and take care of the house chores while everyone else was at school. I had to wake up early before everyone else woke up to prepare their breakfast. After breakfast, I had to wash dishes used for breakfast. I then had to go to the well to fetch water, feed the cows, feed the chickens, take the goats to the field to feed, come back home when the baby and the mother in the house at that time are awake, bathe the baby, feed her, and at noon I would then go to my younger siblings' school and pick them up. When I get back from picking them up, I would then start on dinner before my older siblings and my father came back home. You'll notice that I used mother instead of stepmother because where I come from, your father's wife is your mother, and that is how we address them. And your half siblings are your sister or brother, and that is how we address everyone. So after a while, my mother learned that I was not in school and I had become a maid in my father's house. By the way, I had older siblings, but they never got to do all the chores that I did. Instead, they all went to school and left me to do all these chores, and when they came back from school, they would then maybe just help with fetching water and getting the goats from the field and then get to play. I never got a chance to play. I had to be busy all the time. That was what was expected of me. So like I said, when my mother learned that I was not in school and that I had become a maid in my father's house, she picked me up and took me back to school. I had missed a year while I was at my father's, taking care of the house chores and not in school. When my mother picked me up from my father was not happy. So as a result, he decided never to visit us, nor even ask us to visit him, not even for holidays, unless if mom took us over by force, literally, for the holidays at his place. My mother really tried to make sure that we had a connection with my father. But even when we went for holidays at my dad's, we would come back home empty-handed. No stationery, no clothes, no money, nothing in form of child support. So we would go and come back to my mom's just the way we left. So when I finished my primary living exams, my mother asked my father to contribute to our school fees, but he said that the only way he would contribute was if we moved in with him. My mother had no choice but to let us go live with him. At this time, he had another wife, different from the one that had a baby the first time I visited. In fact, I learned that when that lady got pregnant with her fourth child, Dad was not happy, just as he wasn't when my mother had the fifth child. And he did the same thing he did to the lady, being violent and stuff. However, the lady gave birth to that child, and then later on she decided to leave, of which Dad had to get another woman to come and stay with. My first stepmother wasn't that much cruel, maybe because I was too young to notice that I was being mistreated, and also the fact that I had a father and a baby human living under the same roof. But my second stepmother, my goodness, that woman. This new mother wasn't feeling the vibe of living with the 9 of us minus her 4 kids. So all together we were 13 kids under the same roof. She was horrible to me from day one. First of all, she refused to greet me back when I greeted her, and she could barely look at me. She hated me from the word go. So my results from the primary living exams came back, and it was time for me to go back to school, but Dad barely talked about it. He had not even bought me stationery like all my peers' parents. It was no-brainer which school I would go to. Of course, I knew I was going to go to the same secondary school as my sister, but Dad never mentioned anything. The first term ended and I still hadn't started school. There was no uniform too. I started getting worried. I then asked him about school, but he said he didn't have money. However, he promised to enroll me the second term. The second term started. He bought everyone stationery except me. All my siblings started school, and I was still left at home to take care of the household while everyone else was away. I had 3 Frisian cows to tend to, 3 chicken houses to take care of, holding a maximum of 200 chicks per house, 2 toddlers to babysit. I had to clean around the house, cook, do laundry, fetch water, go to the garden. Essentially, I was a maid again in my father's house. Don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with a child doing house chores, but not when everyone else is in school. Anyway, I then talked to my sister to talk to Dad on my behalf, because every time I brought it up, my dad would get upset and it was the last thing I wanted. She then talked to Dad about me going back to school, but Dad still said the same thing, that he didn't have money but promised to enroll me in the 3rd term. The 3rd term started, and as usual, he bought everyone stationery except me, and I still didn't start with everyone when they went back to school. So in the 2nd month into the term of 4 months, I was still not in school. I then begged my sister to beg my father to take me back to school, which she did. She threatened to tell my mother the truth, that I was not in school, since Dad had asked us to lie to Mom that I was in school. So later that night, we overheard my father and his wife arguing about me going back to school. She refused him to giving in to the threat of us telling our mother the truth, that I was not in school. She also actually threatened to leave my dad if he ever enrolled me to school, claiming that I was not going to amount to anything, I was only going to waste his money, and that the only degree I was going to get from school was pregnancy. Mind you, at that time I was only 13 years when she said all that stuff. However, my father finally allowed me to go to school with my sister the following day, but he had not bought me stationery, nor had he even bought me a school uniform. That didn't bother me. In fact, I was very ecstatic about going to school. Finally, I got out my previous primary school uniform and the books that I had used in primary school. I plucked out the used pages and went with the unused pages to the school. Luckily, I had brought them with me when I came to my dad's. So I had a uniform and books to start school. Very early in the morning, before everyone woke up, I woke up, did my house chores while everyone was sleeping, took a bath, put on my old school uniform, like I said, sat and waited for my sister to take me to school, but without school fees. So she took me to the principal's office and introduced me as her sister. She explained everything to the principal and I was allowed into school while they waited for my father to pass by on his way to work to pay my fees. The day ended and my dad never made appearance at school. Just to take you back, when I was accepted into school, my class teacher then took me to class. But the moment I stepped foot into that class, the whole class burst out in laughter. I was confused. I had no idea why they were laughing. They were laughing so hard at my uniform. I had body sockings and I was putting on a primary school uniform in a secondary school. And you know how kids are. Kids can be cruel sometimes. They had no idea where I was coming from, nor did they even know or understand why I would come to school in a primary school uniform at a secondary school. But they went ahead to laugh. They did. They made fun of me the whole day, so bad that I had to dress in casual wear the following day. After a while, the teachers also noticed that my books had plucked pages. They called me in and asked me why I had such books and why I was wasting my books. I told them that these were my books from my primary school and that I had removed the used pages just so I can have books because my dad had forgotten to buy me stationery. I had no pen. I had no pencil. I had no stationery at all. But my sister gave me a little bit of what she had. That is what I used. I was also borrowing from a few of the kind students. So later, word went around about my situation at school, which forced the school to call my mother. So all this while, we had not told my mother the truth, nor had we even told her about the situation at home because Dad had threatened to beat us if we ever told our mother the truth. So when Mom came at school, she paid my school fees and bought me a new uniform and stationery. She even paid our school lunch and she gave us a little bit of pocket money to help us. One thing I didn't tell you that even though my sister was also enrolled in school, Dad had not paid her school lunch. And because we were staying with another mother who was different from our biological mother, my sister was at the mercy of her friends because she would go to school with nothing packed for lunch, no pocket money, and her lunch at school was not paid. So I really don't even know how these people expected us to survive at school the whole day with just breakfast. So before Mom paid our lunch, my sister had made friends at school and they were the people that helped us with lunch every time. Some of them, in fact most of them, had paid for lunch and they would pack food, and also some of them would come with pocket money. So they would go get lunch with their meal cards and come give us the lunch, and they would then go buy themselves something to eat or maybe eat whatever they came with from home. My mother then called my father and asked him about the situation at home, but she had no idea what she did. And my father found out that my mother had come to school and that she knew about the situation at home. He wasn't happy. In fact, that is an understatement. The guy was annoyed. He was furious with us. And that was the first time my dad laid hands on the both of us. I don't know if you guys know copper wires, but back in the day, those were the wires that were used to connect electricity. I don't know if they're still used even now, but those were the weapons most of the times parents, especially fathers, used to discipline their kids. So my dad used that, and his only reason was us snitching on him. And that was the very beginning of a very dark life in my father's house, at the hands of my father and my stepmother. I don't want to make this video very long, but if you think that what I've told you is horrible and terrifying, I'll tell you everything, every single detail in the next video without holding anything back. Love you guys.